Hello everyone. So this final video on Xenophanes, we're going to talk about his epistemology or his theory of human knowledge, which you will see is one of his significant achievements, this is, if nothing else, this alone would get him counted in the list of philosophers and not just a poet and a rhapsode as we talked about in the first video. So what do we have here? We have a number of fragments actually. And these are pretty brilliant fragments, I have to say again, like with the theological ones. So let me start with fragment 18, where he says, "Yet the gods have not revealed all things to humans from the beginning, but by seeking, humans find out better in time." And here, and we'll discuss this in more detail, he's talking about first human knowledge, which is not sort of, all revealed, we don't know everything, and human progress, that we can find out things through seeking and in time, right? So human progress, very important idea. We'll really come back to this and dwell on it for a bit. But let me go to the next fragment where he says, "No man has seen the clear truth, nor will there be someone who knows about the gods and about everything. And about everything that I speak of, that is, for even if one chanced to speak what is true, even if one had like the luck to speak something that is true, yet one will nevertheless not know it. One could perchance sort of, arrive at the truth, but how do I know that this is the truth? Yeah. In everything, or alternatively amongst everybody, opinion or seeming is made." Yeah, there is opinion and seeming in everything. So this fragment will really focus on this, where he is then making a critique of human knowledge in the sense that how do we know that something that we think of as true is absolutely true? We might actually have arrived at the truth, but do we have full knowledge that it is true, right? And then this very important distinction between knowing and truth and seeming and opinion, yeah? So we'll come back to this fragment as well. I just want to read out, these 4 fragments before we start discussing. Then fragment 35, "Let these things be believed as resembling the truth." And this word, believed, we can also translate it as opined, like let people give this opinion that these things are resembling the truth. And he's talking about something that he has said, and he says that, maybe I can approach the truth somewhat at least, let these things that I say be believed to be, at least close to the truth. And then the last one, fragment 38, "If God had not brought forth yellow honey, they would say figs are sweeter by far." Yeah. And this means that, human knowledge, again, dependent on our experience and, limited by our experience, because we have tasted honey, so we think that honey is a tasted thing. If we had not tasted honey, maybe we would think figs are the sweetest thing. And if we taste something sweeter than honey, we would think that that thing is the sweetest thing, right? So human knowledge as being, in that sense, relative. So these 4 fragments that I read out, and then there will be, a 5th one actually, which is fragment 36, where he says, "As many things as are evident to mortal view." It's a very tiny fragment, we don't know what he's referring to, but the idea of as many things as are evident to mortal view. Mortal view is limited, we humans only see some things, not everything. So let's go, through all the implications of these fragments on human knowledge, as they're called. First, many people have taken these fragments as an anticipation of skepticism. So skepticism as, a post-Aristotelian, Hellenist philosophy, where the idea that, they see emerging from these fragments of Xenophanes is that nobody knows the truth, because even if, they would chance upon the truth, they would not know it, which means that we just cannot know. We don't even know that we know, right? It is impossible to know anything. So the idea that knowledge is impossible because it is impossible to confirm knowledge, impossible even if we discover knowledge, we cannot confirm that we have actually discovered knowledge. So this was, the kind of mainstay of skepticism, that how do you know it is there? How do you know this is true? Can you really confirm it? Can you really say that this is absolutely true with, absolute knowledge? No, because perhaps you have arrived at something that is true, but you cannot know it. Yeah. So that's one sort of implication that people have drawn from these fragments. The other implication that they have drawn, which is a stronger implication and closely related, is this anticipation of a kind of relativistic point of view, in which what he's seen as saying is that opinion and not truth is a criterion of knowledge, in the sense that we cannot really know the truth absolutely. As he says in this fragment, gods have not revealed all things to humans from the beginning, or also that no man has seen the clear truth, nor will there be someone who knows about the gods and about everything I speak of, right? There's nobody who will know about everything that I speak of. And even if I chanced upon what is true, or even if someone chanced upon what is true, that person would nevertheless not know it, right? And, how do we take a step away from skepticism to relativism is the other sentence where he says, in everything, or amongst everyone, opinion, is formed. Opinion or seeming is formed, made, wrought, whichever way you want to translate it, right? So, and then the next one where he says, let these things be believed as resembling the truth, right? Okay, you don't have true knowledge, but at least, believe them as being at least sort of close to the truth. So this idea that, there's always a possibility of error, right? There's always a possibility of error in whatever we say is the case. Why? Because we have relative knowledge, we have incomplete knowledge. We say, oh, the sweetest thing is honey, but then we haven't tasted anything sweeter than honey, right? So it is a relative and incomplete knowledge. But even with that, we can gain some understanding, right? Let it be believed as at least resembling the truth. At least from my point of view, the sweetest thing I've tasted is honey, right? And in that sense, we are fallible, we make mistakes. We don't really have full knowledge or full knowledge of our knowledge. Even whatever knowledge we have, we don't have full knowledge that is, correct or true. And we have widely divergent beliefs depending on our experience. Maybe the sweetest thing I have tasted is honey, but the sweetest thing that you have tasted is something else, is figs, is, apples, is, I don't know, something, right? And so, our beliefs, however, even though, they're widely divergent and fallible, they can be brought, to be resembling the truth. We can try and surmise as close as possible to the truth from our experience. Yeah, we can't know absolutely, which is not ours to know. It is this God, this divine being that we talked about. It is this God's prerogative and ability as far as Xenophanes is concerned. But we can at least surmise the truth. We can at least try and get as close to the truth as possible from our very mortal, very human experiences. So, and that's why fragment 38 is extremely important. So when he talks about this honey and figs, if there was no, yellow honey, we would think that figs are the sweetest thing that we can find, is also a comment really on the limitation of human judgment. Yeah, it's a comment that, our human judgment is relative. Our assessment of any particular experience that we have, any particular sensation that we have, if we think, oh, this is the hottest, that's because this is the hottest that, I have experienced, right? It depends on what experience I've already had. So the taste, if I say this is the sweetest, this is the sourest, it is something that I have had, right? And so I can only experience things in comparison. I can only experience things in a relative manner. If I say that this is, or let's say I'm like happy, right? I'm comparing it to being not happy. If I say this is sweet, I'm comparing it to something that is not sweet, right? So it is, our human knowledge is limited, but also relative and comparative. So this is an important epistemological point that he's making. And that fragment that I quoted at the end, in which, this small thing where he says, as many things as are evident to mortal view. Now, this is another fragment that, has led to some amount of discussion about his epistemology, because is he really making a distinction between mortal and divine perception in the sense that we perceive different things, or we perceive the same thing but differently, right? So in the sense that is mortal view, only a perception of the sensible world, the world around us, and that means a relative sort of perception, and divine view, on the contrary, a perception of everything and a perception of, absoluteness. There's no clear evidence, right? There's no clear evidence. We have just these fragments that you just heard. So, but from fragment 34, we at least know one thing, that he says that we cannot know everything, right? In fragment 34, when he says, there'll never be anyone who knows about the gods and about everything, I say, right? We cannot know everything. So we don't know whether, he's making a distinction between, mortal perception and divine perception. Perhaps he is to some extent, in the sense that, God does, like this God is omniscient, omnipotent. We already saw that. But there is this idea of human perception as being somewhat limited. Yeah. So when it comes to Xenophanes' theory of knowledge, what are the most important ideas that we can get from this theory of knowledge? So first we get this distinction of knowledge and opinion, a distinction of knowledge and seeming. Yeah. So with Milesians already, we had some sort of an assumption of this kind of a distinction of appearance and reality, right? What appears and what lies beneath. Everything is composed of water, everything is composed of air, everything is composed of apeiron, even more strongly. And so in the objective world, they're talking about the distinction between appearance and reality. What we have with Xenophanes is that he is actually talking in human cognition in terms, what we could call subjective terms, but in terms of human cognition, he's talking about this gap between knowing and believing, between knowing and knowledge and opinion. And this is a very important gap, which will have a lot of, say in philosophy that comes after. Already in pre-Socratics, you will see it with Heraclitus, with Parmenides, and Plato makes a lot of it, right? In Plato, this distinction of knowledge and opinion becomes very, very important. But this is one of the earliest sort of evidences we have seen of this distinction being made very important in human epistemology. Then, so that's the first sort of, important idea, I would say. The second that I said I would talk about in detail, so I will do it now because I forgot, is the question of the progress of human knowledge, right? In fragment 18, which I'll read out again actually, where he says, the gods have not revealed all things to humans from the beginning, but by seeking, humans find out better in time, right? The second part of it. By seeking, by searching, by looking for things, humans find out, humans find out they have limited knowledge originally, and their knowledge increases in time, it's sort of, it takes time for this knowledge to increase, but it increases. So what is the point he's making out here? There is this emphasis on personal search, emphasis on search by humans, seeking for knowledge. This need for time, it takes time. You will not immediately get it by the muse telling you things, right? So the idea of progress really and the idea of knowledge dependent on human effort rather than on divine intervention, right? This idea of knowledge that comes from humans making this effort and humans progressing. And this really sort of, reminds me of, like, later on, you have the Ode to Man, this very famous Ode to Man in Sophocles' Antigone, which starts something like Pola ta dena kouden anthropu dainoteron pele. I think that's the sentence. I'll just dainoteron pele. I'll just find it in Antigone. So in Antigone, you have wonders are many, yet of all things is man the most wonderful. He can sail on the stormy sea, through the tempest rage and the loud waves roar around, as he makes his path amid the towering surge. Earth inexhaustible, ageless, he wearies as backwards and forwards from season to season his ox team drives along the ploughshare. He can entrap the cheerful birds, setting a snare, and all the wild beasts of the earth he has learned to catch, and fish that teem in the deep sea with nets knotted of stout cords. Of such inventiveness is man. Through his inventions, he becomes lord even of the beasts of the mountain. The long-haired horse he subdues to the yoke on his neck, and the hill-bred bull of strength untiring. And speech he has learnt, and thought so swift, and the temper of mind to dwell within cities, and not to lie bare amid the keen biting frosts, or cower beneath pelting rain. Full of resource against all that comes to him is man. Against death alone he is left with no defense. But painful sickness he can cure by his own skill. Surpassing belief, the device and cunning that man has attained, and it bringeth him now to evil, now to good. If he observe law and tread the righteous path ordained, honored is he, dishonored the man whose reckless heart shall make him join hands with sin. May I not think like him, nor may such an impious man dwell in my house. So, yeah, sorry, long quote, but this gives you an idea that became pretty important in later times. In 5th century BC, the idea of human progress in Greece became sort of a very important idea. But remember, we're looking at Homer and Hesiod, where human knowledge came through divine intervention. The muses came and told the poets, or you had Prometheus give the fire to humans. So the idea of evolution of human society, the idea of the evolution of the arts and the sciences, is an idea that we can see from Xenophanes. And in fact, many traditional views had the opposite idea. The idea was of degeneration of human society from this mythical golden age. For example, in Hesiod, there was this mythical golden age, and from which we have degenerated. This kind of an idea of a paradise lost, where originally they were good, happy humans who were content with their lot. They were free from work. They didn't have to work. Why? Because they were living in plenty. The nature itself gives plenty, and they lived happily in plenty. And it's from there that we degenerated. And we see that, in later philosophy, for example, with Rousseau, much more complex, but similar idea. Versus this other idea that originally, humans were ignorant, they were brutish, they were working away, and we are still working away. We are working away to survive. And originally, we were at the mercy of the beasts, of the forces of nature. And, it's with our human toil, with our human effort, that we have gradually learned agriculture, technology, domestication of animals, all these other skills that have survival skills that, have led us on this path of progress. So you can already see in this fragment, this fragment 18, by seeking, humans find out better in time. This idea of the evolution of society, of human progress that we already see. So to conclude on Xenophanes, with all this discussion, you can see that he was not, we can't really say that he was a mere rhapsode. He was not a mere rhapsode. But he was not a philosopher in the traditional sense. He was not a cosmologist in the traditional sense, in line with the Milesians, if we think of Milesians as traditional right now, because he's not coming up with the same kind of a philosophy. His philosophy is more of a critique. And we'll see that with Heraclitus, it becomes even stronger. It's a critique of traditional religion. He's a critic of traditional religion and of, the anthropomorphism that is found therein. He's a critic of the anthropomorphic, traditional, limited ideas, as he sees it, of religion. And it's also related to his critique of human knowledge, his theory of human knowledge, his epistemology. And so the other achievement he does in theological terms is that he sort of proposes a notion of unity of the cosmos, of an intellectual, as we said, philosophical God, by strict rationalist principles, right, or stricter rationalist principles rather than by tradition and myth. He raises very, very serious epistemological questions on the nature of human knowledge, the limitations of human knowledge, on human capabilities for knowledge. And he introduces this key distinction between truth and opinion, which becomes very important in later philosophy. And finally, he introduces this idea of knowledge progressing steadily and gradually, and progressing through human striving, human effort, and human invention. So I would say that, all this gives us enough confidence to say that Xenophanes is most certainly a philosopher. You know, he is a poet, nothing stops him from being that, but he is also, you know, a philosopher, and a philosopher that we should take seriously in the history of philosophy. Thank you.